Sorry, are we now? Thinking we are live.
Yeah. Okay. We'll go back to the public section of the agenda and action register on page 12. Who's dealing with this?
So
Can I excuse you for a minute and ask Councillor Beck to take over, please?
okay, so just in terms of the action register, two things that are mentioned there. Obviously one of the things I had to do was approve appointments and advise applicants. Letter has been sent to confirm those appointments, and the second one was about holding workshops around the reform process, which we've had those 2 workshops with councillors to help to bring councillors up to speed. And then obviously we're looking at having that extraordinary meeting at the end of September, when we will come back with information around the feedback that to provide to the DIA for your consideration and hopefully agreement or changes, so that we can send that off. But it'll be based on the work that we've done, a lot of the work that's been done already. So those are the 2 issues that are mentioned on the action register.
Thanks, Gavin. Is any other? Councillor Smith.
Yeah, just to confirm, Gavin, they've received the letters, they've signed contracts, and one has already sat on a hearing and another one will be sitting on a hearing on Friday. So both will be actively engaged from now on. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Right, they're working into their work pretty quick, aren't they?
That's what we've got to do, Alan. We've got 7 hearings.
Yeah, I know. Okay, is there any other questions of Gavin in the action register? If not, can I have somebody to receive that, please? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Lynch, all in favour, please raise a hand. Carried. Rightio, the next one we move on to is on page 14, which is the Policy and Regulatory Committee. Councillor Sedgwick, here we are. Oh, yes, Councillor Sedgwick.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 2 recommendations from that meeting. The first one is the adoption of the stormwater bylaw. So moved.
So moved. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Gibb. No further discussion. I'll put it. All in favour, please raise a hand. Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you. And the second one is the adoption of the 2021 proposed amendments to the water supply bylaw and the water leak relief policy. So moved.
Moved. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Lynch. No further discussion. So,
Yes.
Councillor Church.
Yes, I was actually querying when it says within 10 working days, as to whether we're actually being given a reasonable time frame and whether we can perhaps modify that.
Roger, do you have any comment? Or Carol, one of you 2? Carol?
Yeah, I was just looking at that one. I think that part's already in the existing bylaw before the changes, and we've added in the section B on it with the examples. But we can look at the period of time to extend it if that seems unreasonable.
10 working days is 2 weeks, remembering. You know, not everybody stops at 5 o'clock on a Friday night, as I've realised.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking of mail, being, the length of even people wanting to mail in as opposed to having information. So I thought that we might want to be a little bit more conservative around that time frame.
Councillor, have you got a suggestion how many days you'd like to see there?
Well, it's not, I don't know some of the people that may be involved in this, but even if it's a 15 or 20 working days, does it really make much difference to us? But I was just aware of things like postal. So really, I know it's not the right way of doing it, but I just wanted a little bit of a discussion around that to get a bit of a thought.
If we doubled it, it would be 1 month. That'd be.
It's a long time.
Too
long. Councillor Sedgwick, you got any comment on that?
Yeah, just simply that it's been in the existing bylaw. to my knowledge, there's not been any issues relating to that. I take the point about the post, but I also would suggest that post is probably quite an outdated way of making a written notice. But if nobody's been disadvantaged by the previous number, I would just suggest we stick with what we discussed through all the workshops and very extensively through the meetings on it.
All right, is there any other thoughts? Doesn't seem to be any other thoughts. So I had a mover and a seconder, didn't I? Where's Kayleen?
Yes, you did.
I did. Okay, doesn't seem to be any other thoughts, so I'm going to put it. All in favour, please raise your hand. Opposed? Carried.
Mr. Chair, can I just raise an issue under policy and regulatory, please?
Yes, can
A
do.
call from Federated Farmers Auckland President this morning. We're due to go out for bylaw consultation on the livestock movement bylaw later this month, I think next week, and with their members in Auckland, the northern part of our district, unable to attend public meetings and discuss. He's asked for consideration of a delay in the consultation period, and he's asked if he can have a couple of days to talk to his executive and come back to us. I know we can't make a decision here in this meeting, but I just wonder if there's a flavour with the council to work with the farming community because of the shutdown. We're not losing anything. There's no bylaw in place at the moment. Things are, I don't think there's any issues that Ross may wish to comment, but the reality is if there's a mind to, they would appreciate the opportunity to delay it even November through to February, which was probably part of that they were hoping to avoid, but in the circumstances they can't have public meetings. Thank you.
So when were we going to go out to consult on that? Can somebody tell me?
I believe it was the 29th, but Councillor Sedgwick may just remember.
Of this month or October?
Yes, of September through to mid-October, end of October.
So why don't we still go out but just extend the period?
Well, there's no problem with that. So we can make that announcement later. We'll go out and we can just extend it through further.
I think you get the same outcome. You
Just
just
gone out today, Councillor Thompson saying.
Yeah.
That's what I thought it was today. He said thought it was next week, but the reality is, if we're having gone out, then we just need to extend it.
Yeah.
More practical. Thank you.
I think as long as we take into consideration their situation, and quite honestly, you can't do much up there until you at least go down to level 4, down to 2, and I have no idea when that's likely to be for them.
Exactly. So, okay, well, I'll take it offline. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll note that, take it offline. Okay, thanks for that, Councillor. We will now move to page 16, which is Stratton Finance. Councillor Gibb, somewhere. There you are, Councillor.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. So there are 2 recommendations. The first one is changes to the default high growth projection. We talked about that just recently, so you'll remember that. So I'll move that recommendation.
Seconded with Councillor Thompson, thank you. No further discussion. I'll put it. All in favour, please raise a hand. Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
The second recommendation is the general rate position, the surplus of 35,502 transferred to the General Accounting Reserve Fund. So moved.
So moved. Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Beck. Any further discussion? None. I'll put it. All in favour, please raise a hand. Opposed? Carried. Thank you. I think that's all of yours, Councillor.
Yes, thank you.
Rightio. Next one is on page 17, I think, is infrastructure. Councillor Patterson. We have 4 recommendations.
Yep, thank you. I do have 4 recommendations. The first one on page 17 is the Norrie Avenue Walkway Raglan electricity easement. So moved.
Moved. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Lynch. Any further discussion? If none, all on a show of hands. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Then on to the top of page 18, we've got the Te Kaupara wastewater treatment plant electricity easement. So moved.
Moved. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Sedgwick. All in favour, please raise a hand. Opposed? Carried.
Then moving down to Horsham Downs Hall Reserve right-of-way easement. So moved.
Moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Willerton. Any discussion? If none, moved on a show of hands, please. All in favour? Opposed? Councillor Maguire's opposed to it. You want it noted? He does want it noted. Okay. Carried.
Okay, thank you. And then turn to page 19, the last one, proposed stopping of Unformed Road in Mangata Whiri. So moved.
Moved. Second, Councillor Sedgwick again. All in favour on a rows of hands, please. Opposed? Carried. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Councillor. That was short and sweet. Right. What have I got down here?
Submissions forum, your worship.
Oh, yeah, submissions for the change of Murray Ward. So we have a recommendation down there, which is pretty straightforward. Somebody like to move it? Councillor Lynch, Councillor Beck. Is there any further discussion? None. All in favour, raise a hand, please. Opposed? Carried. Rightio. Next one is back to your supplementary agenda in the Audit and Risk Committee. So go to that. I think that is on page 36. You have a recommendation there. Tony's still here, or is he gone?
He's gone, your worship. He had to
So
go.
do you want to carry this then, Councillor Gibb?
Yes, basically you've read the minutes, presumably. There is a recommendation for the proposed revision. Are you on to that yet? You're happy to
Yeah,
go?
well,
with- yeah.
I'm on to the revised audit committee terms of reference, yes.
Yes. So the recommendation to council is that council adopts the revised audit and risk committee terms of reference. So I'll move that.
Moved. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Sedgwick. And further discussion, I'll put it on a show of hands as aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. That was short and sweet. Well done.
Yep.
Thank you. Rightio. Next one is on,
Item 7.2, your worship.
yeah, so that's back to the original agenda again.
Yep.
Yep. So I'll go back. There's a bit of to and fro in here this morning. That's on page 27. Rightio. Oh no, that's not on 27. What number? 34. 34. Proposed easement stormwater discharge through council reserve to the Waikato River. Roger.
We've got Michelle Smart and Will Gauntlet here to talk to that paper.
Right. Who wants to go first? Michelle, you or Will?
I will. Good morning, Your Worship.
Oh, ladies first anyway, Will. I'm sorry, mate.
Good morning, Your Worship. This report seeks approval for the use of the Flower Mould Reserve for stormwater drainage purposes. Additional information came to light since the report was originally drafted and presented to the Infrastructure Committee last week. The proposal is actually detrimental, in terms of the Reserves Act, the proposal is detrimental to the reserve and its users, but there is a wider public benefit in that it will enable stormwater to be managed from a subcatchment of the Ngaruawahia North development. Will is here to answer any technical questions, and I can answer any questions from the Reserves Act perspective.
All right. Thanks, Michelle. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. And look, I appreciate this revised report because it was on the fly last week, and I think the councillors were a bit concerned as well as to what the changes were without having a paper in front of us. A number of questions here. essentially the developer is doing this to benefit themselves. You talk about a wider catchment. So have we got a catchment? There's a number of questions. Have we got a wider catchment management plan at the moment? Because I see that there's provision for the size of the drain to be extended at some stage, and therefore the ongoing maintenance and cost will, who's going to cover that future cost? And is it an open drain? I see it's going to go down through a rocker, so I suppose it's a gradiated waterfall type thing. It's not quite clear to me. But my concern is here, this is primarily to benefit developers, and it's talking about they should pay the cost, but it doesn't say all of the cost. So is there some community benefit other than the developers and the owners? And will there be a cost within the stormwater rate to cover all this? So there's a whole lot of questions. And I appreciate the paper, but it's the ongoing future cost and desirability of going through that site and the damage that it could achieve with erosion and so on. So is anyone able to talk to that in a generic way rather than absolutely specific?
Hopefully Will's there. Are you there, Will?
Yeah, yes, I'm here. Good morning, councillors.
Thank you,
Worship.
Morning, Will.
So one piece of information as a higher level context is that Watercare is working on a catchment management plan for this wider area, which will, in the fullness of time, help unlock development further north as well. In terms of your specific questions, Councillor Smith, some of those will be addressed through the consenting process in terms of determining risk of erosion and things. In terms of wider public benefit, there's an area to the around the corner of Old Taupiri Road and Galbraith Street where staff believe there's an area of zoned land that could be picked up by this solution. It's there's a little bit of a chicken and egg going on in terms of the developer and council not necessarily wanting to delve too deeply into this option if the easement is not going to be favourable. But if the easement is able to be granted, then further conversations will be had to secure that wider public benefit. There's also the tipping point between where the water flows towards Old Taupiri Road sort of south and the catchment that flows north to Festival Way. There's some area for movement there. So the final solution will, some of which will probably flow south and some of which will flow north into the Festival Way road solution that Ross and the team are considering.
So just on your previous point, if I may, through the chair, the easement, who is that easement going to be in favour of? Because the developer will be gone after the last house is sold. So who is that easement in favour of, please?
Those, your worship, the easement will be in favour of council, so it will be an easement in Gross. So it'll be for the public benefit, ultimately.
So giving ourselves an easement?
Yes, that's correct.
Right, okay.
Okay, look, and I think I'll just go back to Councillor Smith's original point around making this decision the other day compared to today. A lot more information made a lot clearer for me too, so thanks to the team for that. And it does make it a lot easier for that. And probably one of my questions Will's probably actually answered, because I was looking at the map, I was wondering, is this a short term for one developer, or is this a long term for all developers that come after in that Festival Way and up through there? And I think you've probably answered that for me anyway. So that's what I was looking at. Councillor Church first.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, just following on from Councillor Smith's similar ideas. I was interested that when council, I think it was on the bottom of page 37, where councils looked at the 5 options of the effects, the considered options and the conclusions of the criteria, but primarily really looked at 1, 3 and 5, which are around the costs. and really skipped over what I consider is quite important, is actually the users long term of that reserve as a criteria as to what's the best option. So I'd just like a bit more clarity of how council have appraised this, that including, because this is often said in this report around the long-term implications for users of that reserve, let alone council's ongoing liability for costs in perpetuity, as to how they were actually assessed within those criteria. Because these, what I see here is that cost was a big focus on bringing forward your option. So helpful information would be great.
Thanks, Councillor Church, through you, Your Worship. So the criteria 2 and 4, just to answer that part of the question, were considered, but they came out about the same for both of the options considered. So that's why the focus has been on 1, 3 and 5. In terms of the wider detriment to the reserve, Michelle might be able to chip in here. I suppose one impacts the reserve and one doesn't. So I didn't include that as criteria, but there are some, or the developer particularly purports that it'll be of some visual improvement to the reserve, but then there's obviously the permanent change to the reserve as well.
Yes, so Your Worship, so there will be a permanent detriment to the reserve in that obviously the drainage feature takes up a portion down the boundary of the reserve, but there's also a setback that can't be used. And because the reserve is known to have had pre-European or pre-1901 habitation and likely pre-European habitation, and there are historic features on the site, the disturbance of the soil could be considered to be quite detrimental, although we do note that Mana Whenua have a preference for this use of the reserve for that very purpose, because it is in previously disturbed soil.
Yeah, and I guess thank you for that, because I saw the map and it's hard to see what that soil is like now, as I haven't walked on it, and the map in the future is saying there's going to be more wetlands that you can walk around, which kind of inferred to me that the stormwater wasn't just going down the Waka, which I thought was a great feature idea, but that it may have implications for the rest of the reserve with these wetland areas that were on the map. So a bit of clarity around that. You know, if we're only going to enhance and make it easier and better use, then that's, you know, a real good win-win. But I just wasn't sure of those implications. And where's our liability for costs for council?
Your Worship, so the on the river margins, it's actually quite marshy, so it suffers from flooding from time to time, high water levels, and just stormwater runs that way anyway. So the Waka feature itself is likely to represent a visual enhancement to the reserve. It will probably attract more people to view the area, but there will be ongoing costs to council, which aren't known in terms of how, well, not known by me anyway, in terms of being able to keep that area maintained to the required standard.
Yeah, I didn't see any of those costings with that liability forward in the report. So is that someone else who answers that?
I can probably simply add that we've been talking to Watercare quite closely regarding the options, and our main contact in Watercare regarding stormwater, who's a very practical man, has indicated that any of the 6 options make sense from their perspective, and they regularly put their minds to the ongoing costs of things. And just to supplement Michelle's points around those wetlands, my understanding is the wetlands depicted they're existing and not part of this proposal. So it's mainly that Waka feature. You can see on that map you were referring to, Councillor Church, the pipe comes down Galbraith Street, sort of crosses Old Taupo Road, and then comes down towards the Waka feature.
All right, thanks, Will. Councillor Sedgwick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I understand, Will, where you are leading and the logic behind it. but I'm struggling with what appear to be two very conflicting statements, one being in the executive summary where the reserves planner does not support this type of activity on the reserve, and then under the Reserves Act 1977, which says if the proposed easement is considered detrimental to the reserve, which the planner has clearly said in the intro, or to its users, then the Act requires public notification. So how do we even those out, please?
Your Worship, I can answer that.
Yes.
So the if the recommendations of this report are approved, it still has to go through public notification. If there are objections, then it will refer back to council. If there are no objections, then it can proceed. We can't avoid that process. It has to be followed.
That was what I thought. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just following up, and I have had a number of conversations with Will and that previous to the infrastructure meeting and since then. As with Councillor Smith's comments before, was that was concerns I had too as a developer doing the best deal that they can get. I know that Will and Waterken added and also Michelle put a lot of work into this, and I think that it is the best outcome at the end of the day. One stormwater solution is not the best fit for this, so it's going to be probably a couple of solutions going forward. And also around the detrimental to the reserve, following what Michelle's just mentioned, is that reserve currently has 0 people utilise that reserve. It's nothing. It's in a bank down to the river that's covered in a lot of bits of weed, and that heading more towards the flour mill. It's a bit more tidier, and there's a walkway sort of down to there. So in a lot of ways, the design that they've got there would actually enhance that riverbank and probably create a nice little area for people to go and socialise or visit. And also I did follow up to make sure that Mana Whenua were happy with that design, and they felt as though they had a good consultation and discussion and input into it. So I support this.
All right, Councillor Gibb.
Yes, I'm just following on from Councillor Patterson in support of this. I actually went for a drive down there yesterday afternoon just to remind myself of the area. Council has done some native planting on the banks, which has grown considerably since I helped them plant a few years back. And yes, I agree, it hasn't been used a lot by the public, and this new design, if it does end up looking like the picture, definitely will encourage people to walk down there, and it will add pathways, because at the moment you pretty much scramble down the bank and hope you don't slip over. So I was a bit surprised at the comment that it would be detrimental to the public. I actually don't think it will be, but that's just my opinion. So I'm in support of this. Thank you.
Good. Any other speakers? Not councillor, sorry. Roger, nearly gave you the councillor title.
Lovely, thank you, sir. Look, this is one of these classic weighing up benefits and issues. You'll see more of these as we start to develop more constrained areas. I think the tension between zoning and developing enough land for residential use, irrespective of individual developers, we're going to need to start casting our mind to what's best for the broader catchments. This is a classic example. The question would have been put to the reserve planners, does this comply with the Reserves Act? Does it comply with the idealised vision of this reserve? The answers to both those questions will have been no, which would have led to their reaction. We're getting similar kind of commentary around the use of Wainui Reserve for wastewater disposal or irrigation, and it's a change of mindset. So we're at the cusp of having to think differently than we have before. These multi-use kind of scenarios are going to get more common. I really appreciate the debate that the councillors have had today, because I think the fact that Mana Whenua are on board with this. They believe that this will enhance the site. Looking at the design, there's some really interesting things built into this design, which may well improve that area. It's probably very different from what the reserve planners had in mind. It is a hybrid reserve, stormwater function and recreation. But this is the way of the future. So I think it's a very helpful conversation to have had, and I think we'll need to have more of them going forward.
Thanks, Roger. And look, can I say it's been a piece of land where the old flour mill is in council's ownership for quite a number of years now. I can remember when we bought the thing, and it's been a floodplain. It's been all sorts of things. So I think the fact that we're looking to do some work in there, some reclamation to make it look like it is usable, I think is a plus for it. So if there's no further discussion, I've got a recommendation on page 35. Are you happy to move that, Councillor Patterson?
Yeah, I'm happy to move that, please. Thanks.
Councillor Gibbs, second it. If there's no further discussion, on show of hands, all in favour, raise. Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Just also,
Michelle,
Mary Ellen,
as well.
I have a few nice ones coming up in my box there somewhere, and it doesn't align to the conversation, even though it's Roger's conversation, comments were good. My nice one keeps popping up for some reason. It's not me.
I'll take it as you being a nice one. I think you had that complaint the other day.
Yeah. Also, Will, could I just before we move on, just please, this is the recommendation we're in around with the design concept that's here. So if there's any drastic changes to that, I'd like to know about that, please.
Of course.
Rightio, we will now move to the next agenda item, which is the stormwater delegations to Watercare Services Limited. Who's going to speak to this? Carol?
Yes, I can speak to that. Thank you, Mary Ellen. So in relation to the stormwater bylaw that was adopted earlier in the meeting, we're now seeking delegation for Watercare as our providers of stormwater operations and maintenance to carry out, administer and enforce the stormwater bylaw. So Gavin as CE can delegate to staff, but if it's anyone outside of a council officer, i.e. Watercare, then we must come to council. We did a very similar thing last year with the water supply bylaw and the trade waste and wastewater. So what we're seeking here is for two roles at Watercare, the stormwater engineer, which is filled by Andrew Boldero at the moment, and the operations manager Watercare role, which is filled by Matthew Tauther. Both of those people attended the hearings on the and spoke at the bylaw hearings for them to have delegation as outlined in the paper.
I think it's the right thing to do. I don't think there's any issue there. Any other discussion? Councillor Church?
Yes, sure. I'm happy to move this.
Okay, move Councillor Church. Second to Councillor Sedgwick. No further discussion. All let's go aye on the show of the hand, please. Favour, opposed, carried. Thanks, Carol.
Thank you.
We'll move to page 56, which is the petition for roundabout at Horsham Downs. Now, this came up through the was it infrastructure meeting the other day and was well discussed. Any further discussion based on except for the position we decided to take, Councillor Gibb?
Yes, Your Worship. I have read it again, and I am still in support of our decision because of all the reasons that were given. This recommendation is to go back and advise that we've received this. I think that's what the recommendation is about. Contact the people who wrote the petition and advise of the outcome. I was wondering if what we can also do is provide them with a copy of the safety audit of the T intersection and the peer review, because they are concerned, but they haven't seen that type of information, and neither have us, we councillors. We trust our staff, what they've said, but I'm just wondering if it's possible to enlighten the community further so that they feel a lot happier with the T intersection once they know what the peer review and the safety audit said. Is that possible at all?
I'll ask Rogers. That's not classified information, is it, Roger?
I don't believe it will be. Ross, do you have any issues releasing those two documents?
We'll be fine to release those documents, yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, they'll undertake to do that. Okay, Councillor Willerton.
Yes, thank you for that, Janet. Is exactly what I was going to ask. So, yeah, and I've actually been speaking to them, and they have asked if they could receive that. They also like the the traffic survey, just so they can know, just to help them get along. Yeah, because they have been asking for these reports for over 2 years, which had they had some of it, that may have stopped this petition. But anyway, and just along that point, is there any way that we can go to Waka Kotahi and just push back to say if there is any more money there, or is that yeah, just to say that we've had a petition and yeah.
I think probably their best chance is for all of us to take a lotto ticket and commit it to that, because getting any more money out of Waka Kotahi is when I talk to the regional director, he says they haven't even got enough money to run their own part of the business, let alone run ours as well. So I think the fact is, I think this goes back to the point we discussed the other day when Waka Kotahi were looking to do the project. They over-promised and then under-delivered in relation to value to us to do it, understanding it was no longer required. So I'd love them to be defending these positions at the moment instead of us having to.
Well, that's right, and that's what I'm saying. So if there's some way we can write a letter or something and just to say that we're not happy on this issue, and yeah, it'd be appreciated, because I know the community is very unhappy. And then also, it's just a little bit disappointing that and I understand with COVID and everything, that the community couldn't speak on this on their behalf just to have their support of it. And I know we have had some discussion on it. So yeah, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Is there any other discussion? If not, I need a move and a seconder for this recommendation, please. Councillor Willerton, Councillor Patterson. All in favour on a show of hands, please. Opposed? Carried. Rightio. I think that's about it, Galen. I think we've got to the end of it, have we?
Councillor Smith, were you opposed to that last resolution, and do you want your vote recorded?
Oh, sorry. Is this just accepting the petition, is it not?
No, you've just moved, and if you'd read the report, that we received the report, and the council confirms the decision to construct a T intersection at the intersection of Horsham Downs Link and Horsham Downs Road.
So I confirm my opposition.
Hang on, Councillor Willerton.
Can I withdraw?
It's a bit late. I've moved it. You can't withdraw it once it's moved.
Oh, well, I'll vote against what I've done, because I did read it, but going off what Janet said, how we were moving to, her statement. Anyway, I'm going to vote against it.
Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, so that's where I got that. I did read it, but yeah.
I'll confirm my opposition to the resolution. Thank you.
Yeah, so, I'm going to vote against
it. And can I have it recorded?
Yeah. And recorded.
That's going to make for real interesting reading at the next meeting.
Well,
so
I do want to be proven correct in a few years' time.
Your Worship, you should really get a different mover and seconder.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Much as I'm laughing about it. So I've got a mover and Councillor Patterson. Then can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Gibb. All in favour on a show of hands. Opposed? Carried. That help you out, Councillor?
Can I have mine recorded against, please?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it does. And I just sort of hope the people that are going to stand in that ward next year and just how they thought, because I mean, they've gone against what the people want. But that's all right. Thank you.
It's not about what people want. It's about common sense and what we can afford. All right. I think that's about it, Galen.
Yes.
That's all I've got on my 4 bits of paper here with lines through it. So with that, I'll declare the meeting closed. Wish you all a merry day, and we'll wait and see what the stand-up this afternoon has to say. Thank you, everybody. Declare the meeting closed.
We also have a workshop at 1 o'clock today too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, look, sorry, I won't be there. I've got a Waters board meeting, so that'll be taken by Councillor Beck today.
Yep. Thank you.
So that's still on at 1 o'clock. It's not being brought forward.
Still on at 1 o'clock. Yeah, that hasn't changed.